Okay, so I wanted to have a dedicated video to this. This is the Munich conference. It's happening today. Some big people will be there. You're going to have the Secretary of Defense at the Munich conference. I believe you're going to have General Kellogg is going to be at the Munich conference, and he plans to be on the sidelines talking to European leaders. J.D. Vance is going to be there, and J.D. Vance and Zelensky are supposed to meet at the Munich conference. And we're going to talk about the Munich conference, but I want to set it in light of a previous Munich conference. So this was the famous Peace in Our Time speech, where Neville Chamberlain declares that the British people are going to have peace in their lifetime. Again, it's 1938, and it's because it just came from a Munich conference, and he's holding the Munich Agreement. Now, what is the Munich Agreement? Okay, the agreement provided for the German annexation of part of Czechoslovakia. It's called the Sudetenland, where more than 3 million people, mainly ethnic Germans, lived. The pact, also known in some areas as the Munich betrayal, because of a previous 1924 alliance agreement and a 1925 military pact between France and Czechoslovakia Republic. Okay, so that's an interesting backdrop. Now, that was the agreement that came out of a peace deal. This is nothing like this. This is something different, but I'm afraid it's going to have potentially the same effect over time if something doesn't shift from where it seems like it's going here, and that we'll see another repeat of something famous like this picture. This is Neville Chamberlain holding up that thing in a little bit of a video clip of it. Okay, so but before we talk about that, let's talk about this. The context here was that World War I was pretty awful, as everybody knows. Like World War I in the 19 teens, it was slaughter beyond people's belief. And a generation later, there was no appetite for war in Europe. Well, not from the peace-loving nations. There was an appetite in Germany, but within France and England and so on and so forth, they were just not wanting to have any kind of war. So it's 1938, so it's about 20 years later, and they're like, look, we don't want to repeat this. I have this agreement. He will honor this agreement. We're going to have peace in our time. Didn't work out. Okay. Institute for the Study of War says the DDIS intelligence assessment notably warns that a secession or freeze in the war in Ukraine on terms favorable to Russia will free up significant Russian military resources for their involvement in another future conventional conflict. Okay, so we're talking about creating a peace deal. A peace deal now could actually create the future, set the table for future worse situations than right now. But I thought this was a horrible war. Yes, it is a horrible war, and people are dying, and this is bad. But you could make it worse if you're not careful. Okay, this is Anton Gerashenko talking about the annual Munich Security Conference. It's an annual event. It's not trying to create a deal right now, but this is where the major players are going to kind of formulate or present and float ideas about a deal. And that's why I'm setting it in the backdrop of the Munich conference in 1938. Munich will briefly become the global capital of diplomacy, but I think it's worthwhile to remember, especially right now, that Munich was also the site of one of the biggest diplomatic failures of the 20th century. It was in Munich in 1938 that the UK and France signed an agreement with Germany and Italy to appease Hitler. The agreement is also known as the Munich Betrayal. It allowed Nazi Germany to annex the Sudetenland regions of Czechoslovakia, where many ethnic Germans lived. This decision was made without Czechoslovakia's participation. Does that kind of sound familiar when we're worried about this kind of thing? And the country was forced to accept the terms to avoid war. The United Kingdom and France, pursuing a policy of appeasing Hitler, hoped to maintain peace in Europe. However, this only strengthened Germany's aggression. In March 1939, it occupied all of Czechoslovakia, and in September of 1939, it launched World War II. Okay, I hope this weekend and the next crucial weeks will not go down in history the same. I hope so too. Okay, this is Michael McFaul saying the U.S. Secretary of Defense spelled out all of Ukraine's concessions. I hope, and this was yesterday, he's like, well, you know, they're not joining NATO and they're probably going to have to give up some land and that sort of thing. What? Okay, I hope he will now articulate what concessions his administration expects from Putin. maybe we'll hear more at the Munich conference of 2025. And so it wasn't just Hegseth saying this, but then Trump was kind of spelling the same kind of thing out afterwards as well. Now, here's Keith Kellogg getting on a plane. And I hope this picture does not become an iconic picture like this picture here, right? He's getting on a plane. Presidential envoy for Russia and Ukraine begins a 10-day European diplomatic mission. Kellogg brings what he calls a good, reliable plan. Now, he said he doesn't have a full plan, but a good, reliable plan to end Ukraine's war. He'll join Munich Security Conference and hold key meetings at NATO and EU headquarters. And so we'll see how that all plays out. He's going there to kind of present the bare bones of the plan and to listen to his European counterparts. European leaders, you have to step up and push back against anything that allows Putin to get away with what he's done. And if you do not do that full-throatedly, unreservedly, it's going to be bad. I mean, I just don't know how to say it any better than that. Russia's digging in deeper. It's expanding its imperial plans, raising defense spending by a stunning 42%. Now it's 7.5% of its GDP. That means it's about 40% of its overall, but it's actually 41% of the entire Russian budget is devoted to military right now. The state budget. With European averaging only 1.7% of GDP, Russia sees this as an invitation. I think that's very fair. European leaders have called for assurances that Kyiv will be part of any peace talks with Russia after President Donald Trump stepped up and pushes to broker a deal to end the fighting in Ukraine. But they have to do more than say, hey, we want to be part of the process. They have to say, no, this can't stand. That has to be. They have to be more involved in a much more significant way. Otherwise, this could go off the rails. Europe could have invested $100 to $200 billion over the past 3 years. I think I talked about this in my daily brief this morning, but instead they'll have to invest $3 to $5 trillion over the next 20 years. That's the reality. If this goes the wrong way, it's going to cost far more than it costed by not providing what they needed in a more timely, like they've been living off the peace dividend, and the peace dividend is now, they didn't realize that the peace dividend was a loan and it's coming back with interest. And they haven't really maintained what they needed to maintain. I've talked about this many times in the past. Politicians made very unwise decisions because they were afraid. That's probably true. Okay, Zelensky says, imagine that Hitler wasn't destroyed. Imagine that after everything he did to the Jews, people said, okay, well, let's look for a compromise. What are you going to give up? What are you going to give up? Because that's where we are right now. And it's just an awful thing to behold. No NATO membership. This is former Foreign Minister Gabriel Landsbergis from Lithuania. No NATO membership. No boots on the ground. Sounds like abandoning Ukraine. Delegates are flying to Munich not to negotiate, but to deliver to Zelensky the bad news. If this deal produces a piece of paper guaranteeing peace for our time, we should call it Munich 2. That's right, you should call it Munich 2. God forbid that we have Munich 2. This will be the entrance into World War III. Okay, is Trump the Chamberlain of our time? St. Javelin put this out. Will he appease Putin, letting Russia regroup, rearm, and come back for a full occupation of Ukraine, triggering World War III? We hope not, but this is kind of what it feels like. Now, again, today is a snapshot. It's not the whole picture, but okay, this is where we are today. I'll be monitoring what's happening in Munich. We'll talk about what happened in the conference tomorrow and the next day, and we'll go from there. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.